my name is Katie. Welcome back to my channel, Life Between Words. I'm really glad that you dropped by today. I'm going to be giving you some monthly recommendations. Monthly Recommendations is a Goodreads group started by Trina from Between Chapters and Kayla from Kayla Rain. They're both lovely. I love their channels. I'll link them down below, and I'll also link the Goodreads group. This month, the theme for Monthly Recommendations is survival stories. The first book that I want to talk about today is called The Indifferent Stars Above, the harrowing saga of a Donner Party bride. This follows the entire group traveling out west to California, but it focuses particularly on the story of one of the women on the journey named Sarah Graves. She traveled with her husband and her family and then met up with the Donner Party. For those who aren't familiar with the Donner Party, although I'm sure you've at least heard of it, they were part of the Oregon Trail, and they took a new and untested route through the Sierra Nevadas, and they started too late and ended up getting stuck in the snow and had to survive the winter on meager rations and reverted to cannibalism, unfortunately. Some of them, including Sarah Graves, ended up trying to make a trek over the Sierra Nevadas in order to bring back help for the entire party. This book talks a lot about how these people survived under these really harsh conditions, but it also talks about just surviving the Oregon Trail. Surviving the Oregon Trail in and of itself was a feat. This book was riveting, but you kind of need to have a strong stomach because it does go into some grisly details about what happened at Truckee Lake and what happened on the mountain pass as they were trying to go bring back help. But I highly recommend it. It was really good, and it was fascinating, and it makes you want to read a lot more about the westward journey in general. I lived out in LA for a while, and when I moved back home to Wisconsin, that's where I live, my mom drove back with me, and we actually stopped at Truckee Lake and saw the site and read another book about the Oregon Trail. It's something that I'd actually like to read more about. We have Fox again today? What's wrong? What's wrong, honey? It's been a hard day. The next book I want to talk about is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This was one of my favorite books from last year. It's a post-apocalyptic novel. It follows a few different timelines. It follows a pre-pandemic world and a post-pandemic world. One of the characters that we follow in the post-pandemic world is a woman named Kirsten. She travels between settlements with a group of people who are actors and musicians. And their motto, and something that she has tattooed on her arm, is the phrase, "Survival is insufficient." And really, I think that's what this book is about. Yes, there's a lot of elements of survival in it, but one of the themes that it discusses is that life is about more than just surviving. If we reduce life to only survival, then it takes a little bit away from what makes us human. Life is about bringing joy to people and looking for hope and finding our humanity. It's a really beautiful book, and I loved it because it didn't just have to do with these people who were surviving in this terrible, terrible situation. It had to do with looking for more and what makes life really worth living. The next book that I want to talk about is a book that I haven't heard talked about on BookTube much. It's an oldie but a goodie in my opinion, and one of my all-time favorites, and that is Cold Mountain by Charles Frazier. It's a historical fiction novel that takes place during the Civil War and follows two characters, Inman and Ada. Inman and Ada were pre-war sweethearts, and in this book, Inman has deserted the Confederate Army and is trying to get back to Ada. In the meantime, Ada is living on her father's farm. Her father has passed away, and she's there alone, and she doesn't know how to survive on her own. And a woman named Ruby happens upon Ada and helps to teach her how to farm, basically, how to live on her own. So both Ada and Inman are trying to survive. This is a really, really beautifully written book. It's very tragic, but it's not without hope, which is always my criteria for tragic books, and it's a great survival story. The next book that I want to mention is the first horror novel that I ever read. My husband recommended it to me when we first started dating, and that is The Terror by Dan Simmons. The Terror is also sort of a historical fiction novel, but there's elements of fantasy in it, and the historical fiction is based in true events. It follows real live ships trying to find their way through the Northwest Passage, and the ship gets stuck, and they're stuck for like 2 years. And the captains of these ships, Sir John Franklin and Captain Charles Crozier, are left to try and help their crew survive. Their rations are obviously diminishing and also going rancid, and the ships are being crushed by the ice, and then also there's something out on the ice that's trying to get them. And so they have to figure out a way to survive and find people again, and they're stuck in the ice. I also recommend reading this in the winter under a very warm blanket. It doesn't feel like a summertime book because the themes are too heavy, but I don't know, maybe people like to read heavy themes in the summer. I generally don't. But also because it takes place stuck in the ice, you feel really cold while reading it. And the last book that I want to mention is perhaps a little untraditional, but I wanted to mention it because it's sort of the first survival story that most of us as kids were introduced to. And that is Charlotte's Web. I think probably most people have heard and read and loved Charlotte's Web, but on the very off chance that you haven't, it's about a pig named Wilbur and his friendship with Charlotte, and Charlotte's quest to help Wilbur be seen as something more than just a pig, something extraordinary, so that he's not slaughtered at the end of the summer by Fern's father. It's a really, really beautiful story of finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. I wanted to mention this book because it's sort of the first survival story that we all read. And we don't really think about it as a survival story, but Wilbur is trying to find a way to not be slaughtered. So I'd say that's trying to survive, if anything. So those were my 5 survival stories. Let me know below some of your favorite survival stories, and we'll see you next time. Hey Fox, can you say goodbye?
Bye-bye.
Bye!
A candle.
You want to play with the candle?
Okay.
Really good parenting going on right here.
Yeah.
It's an angel. That's an angel blowing on a trumpet.